Hi everyone, I'm Mr. Smith. It's Friday, Paraskevia. Today we're looking at our third noun declination in Georgian. The third brunva, Mitsem-it-i brunva, is possibly one of the most important ones that we should learn as it deals with how verbs act upon nouns. Unavoidable in daily life, as invisible as oxygen, it's one of the most important tenses you'll ever need to learn in this language and in many others. But in Georgian, of course, it's got a few secrets that you need to figure out. So, if you're ready, let's go. Let's begin with my Instagram poster and the title of today's lesson, Micemiti. Now, Micemiti, coming from the word mitsema, which means simply to give or giving, attributing, is the dative case, if you want to Google it. But what does that really tell us? The point, I think, is that in the English language and from an English language perspective, we're always going to struggle with the dative case because we find it to be constructed in the syntax of the sentence. It is a perhaps logical estimation. In Georgian, there are no guesses. You will know what you are acting upon because it takes a different ending. This in this bottle is water, tkali, and it's just water. That's all it is at the moment. Now, if I'm drinking it, then I'm going to attach to this word an S. It's here, actually, with წერելի, which means letter, tkali, which means water, წერილს, acting upon a letter, and წერილს vsvam. წერილს vsvam. I am drinking water. Or indeed, water, S, I'm drinking. That's how we're going to see it. Because as we learn to construct the dative case in Georgian, we're going to work a little bit from right to left, from this way, to understand how it functions. Let's look at our example. The important thing is that this is აკაკი წერეთელი, and აკაკი წერეთელი was best friends forever with Ilya Chachavadze, which I think you probably will know, and they are famous poets, writers. This man, gentleman, is indeed everywhere. His name, წერეთელი, I hope will become as familiar to you as Mitsem-it-i by the end of today's tutorial, so that both things exist at the same time. And we're going to use his name, in fact, as a fun way to illustrate today's lesson. Da წერა is the verb to write. When you write, you can say, for example, in English, I'm writing. You know, you're always assuming, what are you writing? If I say to you that I'm writing a letter, you're thinking, well, who are you writing the letter to? English letters begin with dear, right? That's the point of a letter, to address to somebody. So to whom are you writing that letter? You can see where I'm going here, because the pudze, which is from da წერა, წერ, is, well, I just thought it was fun. And so this წერելի needs a dative ending, which is წერილს. აკაკი, წერეთელი, his name. წერილს, the letter, this S added. წერს. Now, if you Google it, you're going to see that the third person is წერს. Me, წერილს, ვწერ. I'm writing a letter. But we are learning this new approach where we go from right to left to understand the dative. As a disclaimer, as you probably already know, word order in Georgian is quite flexible, but this is the word order that we're going to apply for the duration of this tutorial so that we from the English language can see a progressive inclusion of the dative case in simple sentences, that we can drag and drop our S when required. It isn't always visible. It isn't always said. In this case, let's look again. აკაკი, წერეთელი, წერილს, წერს. Let's say he's writing, you must be asking yourself, well, who is he writing the letter to? The letter is the object. The subject is him. He's writing a letter. He's acting upon that letter. To whom is he writing that letter? And that M is where we have a head start. To whom is a dative, question. To whom is he writing the letter? Deda, to his mother. But she also needs to be aligned in that case, so dedas. So if I were to add now the person to whom he's writing the letter, აკაკი, წერეთელი, წერილს, ს-წერ-ს, დედას. He is writing a letter to his mother. Of course, in English, we don't really see it with additional components, affixes or suffixes. In this case, indeed, this is an exception in the Georgian language. The verb da წერა, to write, or წერა, logically, if you Google it, that S isn't there. It's slightly archaic, but indeed correct Georgian, that the act of writing a letter clearly has a dative outcome, and so it has an S included in the beginning and an S included at the end. This one, წერ-ს, is because it's the third person. It's because აკაკი, წერ-ს, მე, ვწერ. But this S indeed links very much to this S because the letter has a dative relationship because it's being written to Dedas, his mother. So there's a lot of S's to deal with. I will add that obviously this word ends with an S. This one begins with an S. This sound is ts. So when you've got წერილს, they blend, and to some people, they barely even need it. It's very text-based and just absolute good grammar. And so you will probably not hear it. Remember that in English, we often do that as well. His brother's sister. You could not hear the repeat of that S. And that's what's really happening here in Georgian, to the extent that you might never see this S unless it's really deliberately put in. But I hope from this introduction, as we start to go through some examples, that you can now see how we're going to approach understanding the dative. Slide 1 compares 5 nouns with 5 different vowel endings. Puli, money, da, sister, mepe, king, okro, gold, and ku. Now, the removal of some of these endings helps us know if it's in the genitive or in the dative. Because if you remember from video 43, which this was the content, ስ-წერ-ს ბრუნვა, then you will know that only in 2 cases does it really lose its vowel. Now, I know in traditional classes, you're going to hear that it also loses the I, but please understand and watch that video again. I never think of it that way. It might be beneficial just to listen to what I see. Puli, s. Not pul is the pudze with an E that is added and then removed and with an S, and now it's is. That's so confusing. Because when you look at the dative, if you really look at it, why don't we say that in these E, A, E in the ስ-წერ-ს ბრუნვა stays, whereas A and E disappear. In the dative case, E goes. It's gone for good. You never see it again. And then A and E, they actually just get the S added to them. And so that is fundamentally how you can definitely know the difference between these two. So please understand and follow my structure. And then, of course, it is obviously a bit frustrating that in okro, gold, okros, kus, they are the same. So it's only because the ስ-წერ-ს ბრუნვა isn't a verb. This is a verb forward case. This one is, that your intuition should kind of let you to sort of sequence it better. But that does take time. When necessary, the fundamental point is that most Georgian nouns in the nominative end in I. So if you can just remember this, I'd say that you've got 80% of Georgian words pretty much down, and deal with the rest of the exceptions when necessary. So the last is an example that I created. We're going to look at it, like I said, in English it's like, I am collecting silver coins. I'm collecting coins made of silver. That's the sentence. That's what we're going to analyze. But I want us to look at it from saying the same thing, but reading from right to left. So agroverb is collecting, with my root there. Vagroverb, I'm collecting. See, we're moving from right to left. So vagroverb, agroverb, vagroverb, monet-ebi. Monet-ebi is in the nominative, but I am collecting these coins, and so the E is gone, the S is added, monet-ebs. Monet-ebs, vagroverb. Indeed, just looking at that part, my sentence is complete. I don't need the subject here. That is a very Anglo-Saxon forward structure. Georgians don't need it. It is actually included for double emphasis and indeed has a function. But today, as we're looking at relationship between the verb, vagroverb that I'm using, monet-ebi, my nominative noun in plural, then let's forget about the subject. So the V does all the work for us in this order. Vagroverb, monet-ebs. Now let's say that I collect only coins made of silver. Take a look at some coins here. I don't collect the gold ones. Okros, monet-ebs, ar vagroverb. Vertschlis, monet-ebs, vagroverb. I collect silver coins. Vertschli is a nominative noun. It hasn't lost its ending because it's in the genitive, right? If it was in the dative, that would go. It'd be vertschls, but that's not what we're doing. We're just saying that it is made of silver. I'm collecting coins made of silver. And so this natisa obiti brunva number 4 complements this Mitsem-it-i brunva number 3, giving me I am collecting coins made of silver. The fact that the endings look the same, I hope that you can see from this example that they're not doing the same. And so vagroverb is the verb that is pushing the Mitsem-it-i brunva into existence. So, me vertschlis, monet-ebs, vagroverb. Me vertschlis, monet-ebs, vagroverb. I am collecting silver coins. This word order is going to be flipped slightly in the next slide because, as in English, when we ask questions or the concept is interrogative in a certain way, then word order does change to show that, and that's coming up in the next slide. Slide 2, let's look at 4 examples using the same verb, all expressions of the dative, but with little technical differences. ስ-წერ, I am writing. About, ze, right? Look at how this preposition here is necessary. Now we know ze because we use it for a preposition of placement. Magida ze, on the table. So I suppose I could say that I'm writing on my parents in a sort of very academic way. The bottom line is that ze is also a dative ending. And so chemi mshoblebi becomes chems mshobleb ze ס-წერ when I'm writing about them. This verb drives the noun. And so it is now forced into the dative and it takes these endings. But it is not necessary to say mshobleb ze. That wouldn't be right, although inherently that's what's going on. So, chems mshobleb ze ס-წერ. Please be aware as well that this M is pretty silent. So, chems mshobleb ze ס-წერ, pretty common. Pure Georgian, you gotta hear that M. Street Georgian, I almost never hear it. Moving forward, the next example is a more pure expression of dative because we have an object, a direct object, the letter that I'm writing, an indirect object to whom that letter is for, and we've already seen this structure. So, ስ-წერ, წერილს, მშობლებს. I'm writing a letter to my parents. That's how we might see it in English. But in Georgian, მშობლებს წერილს ვწერ. I'm writing a letter to my parents. The S here within the verb is indicating that the direction of my finished object goes further. So the direct object is წერելի and the indirect object are მშობლები, both declined with the S to connect it to the verb. This is important to observe. The use of the H symbol or the S symbol on certain sounds that are perhaps never spoken but always written is a completely different explosion of learning which we won't get into. But there is a logical reason for this. But for today's tutorial, we're just going to say that the S is a dative indicator so that I know that I am writing something to somebody, and that is the flow and purpose of my writing. If I were writing a poem, things would be different. You don't always have to write a poem to someone. If I'm writing a book, you don't write a book to someone. You just write a book about something. So you can see how the use of these endings flirts. The verb drives the noun, but the actual output, you have to trust your intuition, matters. So let's look at a question. You like to write poems. And so I'm asking you, როგორ წერილს? Როგორ წერილს? How do you write a poem? Lexi, a poem. Lex, dative, because the verb is writing. As a question, we flipped the word order. And so, როგორ წერილს? How write you, შენ, poem? And then it's in the dative. That's my question. My answer is I. Maybe I show you an example. I როგორ ვწერ ლექსებს? I'm telling you that ლექსები, I have written many poems. ლექსები is nominative. ლექსებს, dative. ვწერ, I'm writing. I როგორ ვწერ ლექსებს? This is how I write poems. The purpose of this red box and this is that when the idea operates with question words, whether the question word is active here in red as a question or not active but part of the sentence, then the word order generally changes. And for today's tutorial, we're just going to deliberately change it because as much as we've learned the structure that we've been following, we can, of course, clearly flip it and learn interrogative questions using dative too at the same time. Our final slide, we've almost finished, and of course I'd like to introduce what's coming next week. We're looking at the core verb in the Mitsem-it-i ბრუნვა, Mitsem-a, which is to give. We're going to be looking at just that verb in different grammatical times because that's something that we didn't really look at today. Here we're going to be looking at how question words disrupt and dictate word order, but with solid understanding of dative and looking for those S's, we can really understand it. We've really divorced ourselves from Anglo-Saxon English grammar and married ourselves to Georgian dative grammar. So, ras ugzavni upros. Ras, dative. Ugzavni, that's my verb. Upros. Uprosi is my boss in nominative. Upros is my boss in dative. Ras ugzavni upros. Emails vuksavni. Emails vuksavni. I don't really need to explain that word, but I will say emaili, nominative, emails, dative. Vuksavni, I am sending or I send an email, right? That's what I send. Now, here, of course, it's using a question word, which I said dictates and to some extent disrupts word order, but როგორ vuksavni ჩემს უფროს emails. This is how I send my boss, chemi uprosi, chems upros, email, emaili, emails. Dative, 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 verb. Rogor here, just to disrupt word order. As you can see, I as the subject, me, not even necessary. It's been obliterated out of these examples and you didn't even notice. Okay, that was one of my goals. Now, just to conclude, here at the bottom, remember that we looked at vagroveb as to collect coins. Vagroveb, yeah, I'm collecting coins. She vagrovot. Rogor she vagrovot puli. You'd think it would be rogor she vagrovot pools, wouldn't you? How to save money as a piece of advice. It's really the reason why I made an emphasis on question words and dictating the word order. Rogor she vagrovot puli is how to save money. But that money isn't really a direct object, neither a physical object, and it has no final destination. It's sort of hypothetical money. And so in this case, interestingly enough, Georgians do not attach a dative ending. So rogor sheva grovot puli, how to accumulate, save money. Now, if I'm going to use the verb in action, here we've got vugzavni, I am sending. I got she vagrove. She vagrove is how I saved or accumulated puli. Now, pools is indeed the correct ending if it were not in the ergative tense. Rogor shevagrove puli is how I saved money. This is actual physical money. But when we speak in the past, in the nominative past in Georgian, the S disappears always, and whatever was your verb dative in present is now verb nominative in past. I'm leaving that with you because this was how we started our class and how we're ending, because of course after next week's verb breakdown we're going to return to the dative and have a lot more practice into this particular exception, because now with a solid understanding of the dative we'll have to really look at how the dative S simply disappears once again when we're using an ergative past where the object, direct object, is now in nominative and the S just isn't there. Got it? Good. That's the last slide of today, and thank you very much. Next week, as promised, we're looking at the verb to give in Georgian. I give, I gave, he gave me, and so on. This verb is essentially very tricky because the pudze changes in different time references. Not only that, we want to consider all of the other things that we've been learning over the last few weeks. So, with that said, have a nice weekend and I'll see you then. Bye.